Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this is an ACDA Advocacy and Collaboration episode. Joe Cerruti is one of the committee members on our Advocacy and Collaboration Committee, and he introduced me to the guest from today. Dr. Jay Butterfield is not just a passionate music educator with roots in both choir and band world. He's also an administrator, and he cares about his teachers, his community, and comes from the approach of servant leadership. This was such a fun conversation to hear his story through growing up in different musical situations and how he got into administration. You'll learn a lot about servant leadership, about how to approach hard things, but really, at the end, Dr. Butterfield presents you with 5 fabulous tips for how to connect and work with and get the most out of your administration. Now, Dr. Butterfield comes at this from a school administration perspective, but so many of these ideas can be a part of your life, whether you are in a school or a community or a church. It's just good practices. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. Before we dive in, we have to thank our sponsor. You'll hear about that in a second. And I really want to make sure that if you are looking for more community, more ways to engage, I'm giving little tips of what's coming. Check out our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/musicedmatters. We have monthly meetups where we talk about things such as how to engage and how to reach and communicate with your community to make bigger impacts, and how do we act and serve as servant leaders. It's such a fun community, and I'd love to have you join us over there. If you have a moment, it takes less than 60 seconds. Like and review the podcast. It's how we get these messages into more people's ears. And as Dr. Butterfield says in this episode, we can tell our stories, but it's only those in earshot that get to hear it. When you share the stories and those people share the stories, those that can hear the impact and the power of music grow exponentially. Who are you going to tell a story to today? Without further ado, I present this conversation with Dr. Jay Butterfield. Music Education and Administration, how to make it a win-win for all. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we are welcoming Dr. Jay Butterfield. Hello, Dr. Butterfield.
Good morning or good day.
How are you? It is so nice to finally have this conversation.
Yeah, it's great. I'm excited. We're doing fine. We're in South Carolina and just made a tremendous move, and we're really excited about it. I can see the Stono River from my window, and that's kind of cool, and it's beautiful weather and just lots of fun.
It's beautiful. Well, I know South Carolina is great this time of year. Tell the listeners, who's Dr. Butterfield?
Okay, so first of all, welcome listeners and those viewers who might take this up. I am a musician by heart and a grandfather, as a matter of fact.
That's a big, important piece. Yeah, that's a big piece.
It's huge. And so I have 3 tumbleweed grandsons, and they're pretty cool. And they kind of routinely wreck the house or wreck the car or wherever they are, and I love it. It's just, they're so much fun. As far as me, it's hard to talk about one's self, but just a little background, I guess, on the story. Started out as a kid who liked to sing. My dad was a musician, and not by trade, but just because he was a great musician, and got me into singing. And then I got into playing the trumpet and went through high school, middle school, elementary school, high school, through the music programs, and then went on to college at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which a lot of people go, what? But it actually, I think, precedes Indiana University, the big one. And got 2 degrees there, a bachelor's and a master's in performance, one in voice performance, the second one in conducting, choral conducting, and then went on to get my educational leadership doctorate at the Penn State University. And so doing that led me through the whole career of being a music teacher while performing, and then going on to being an administrator who also was an advocate for the arts throughout my administrative career. I actually ended up the career with supervision of principals and district level programs in a
Wow.
semi-large urban school district. So there was all the joy of working with underserved students and keeping programs going when budgets could be tight. So lots of energy around that, lots of fun, but also a lot of conflict resolution in that work.
Okay, well, I want to loop back to the conflict resolution in a second, but let's go back to you have music in the home because your dad. What's your first musical memory in school?
Oh gosh. I think elementary chorus and elementary band, they kind of came at the same time. And I got to sing a little solo when I lived in Texas. I got to sing a little solo, some BJ Thomas song, who probably nobody who's listening to this even knows who that is. But and my voice hadn't even changed yet, and I was
Yes.
this little kid singing in kind of soprano voice to BJ Thomas's "You see this guy's in love with you." I didn't even know what love was, but that's kind of the first memory.
That's awesome. Okay, so you did bring up the voice change. Do you remember going through it?
Yeah, it was rough. It was traumatic.
Oh,
And the
really?
reason I say that is because I was also trying to be in a rock band at the same time. Well, anybody who's a singer or who works with singers knows that when your voice changes, you should take your foot off the gas pedal. But I didn't. I did it the other way, and I could have probably damaged it trying to be a rock singer. I had no business trying to do that, and fortunately, I didn't find that out in a career way. Like, didn't fail as a rock musician. I just was a kid trying it out. But when the voice changed, it was just like there was an there was an old issue. I think it was Brady Bunch or something where they sang this song. It's time to change, and it was absolutely that. It was like all over the place all the time. Pretty bad.
I love it. I have a student in my tenor bass ensemble who just started changing. Maybe 2 weeks ago, the tone quality of the speaking voice started to change. And then last week in rehearsal, we have to scrap a song because it's just not even possible to figure out. Like, it's so late in the game. And oh man, he's so devastated. He would be a soprano one for the rest of his life if I'd let him.
Is the concert already? Has it already been held?
It's in a couple weeks, so we're kind of
Okay.
maneuvering some things around. He just has
Yeah.
lost some. I'm still keeping him in his head voice. I love to ask that question because our voice change is a little different than your voice change mechanically, and it's fun to see. But a guy who loves to sing and to see them go through it. Oh man! But okay, let's go to the rock band thing. Was this like a garage rock band?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, and
It
what were
was.
your
It was.
instrumentations?
It was a junk band, so it was rhythm guitar, lead guitar, bass guitar, drummer, and vocal, and I was just
Okay.
front. I was just front. So,
Nice. And what were what were you covering? Were you writing your own stuff or were you
oh
doing covers?
no, it was just junk. Listen, we sang "Sweet Home Alabama" and you know Deep Purple, stuff like that. It was just,
Yes.
it really wasn't. Nobody should have to listen to that sort of
Oh, but
thing.
it's so much
It
fun.
was
I'm just
rough.
wrapping up History of Rock and Roll as one of the
Uh,
courses I'm teaching right now. And some
yeah,
of their final projects were to create a band. Like one of your options for your final project was create a band. And man, I'm getting some great stuff.
that's
It's
cool.
really good to hear what they're making. It's crazy how they use technology today. But okay, so you were in a rock band. You transitioned through high school. You played trumpet. What was your instrument? Like, what did you perform in with trumpet?
Well, I really just being, in small ensembles and marching band, concert band, marching band actually led to me being the drum major at IUP marching band,
Nice.
which has named itself the Legend or the Beast of the East. I don't know, but it's just a little fun. But that is a great marching band. It has a long history and just it was sort of formative to my whole life. Actually, there's a feature movie coming out in about a year, small studio thing about one of the charts we did called Amazing Grace, which has seemed to have influenced kids all over the kind of the northeast part of the country, and
Wow.
of course all of us hugely influenced. So trumpet, marching band, a lot of solo work, church solo work. Everybody gets to play Easter sunrise service,
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. That was always fun. And I hate to take a turn back because I know you're heading in a certain direction,
No,
but
I
the
love where
thing
we're
with the
going.
changing voice kids, I took an ensemble to PMEA, or I think it was the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association state convention, and it was a middle school ensemble. And I had 3 or 4 boys who were going through the change. And so I actually rewrote their music so they could stay within a fourth or a fifth.
Yes.
So if it went above that, I dropped them the octave. And if it went below that, I put them up an octave and wrote their part out, taught them the part. And they were fine singing their 4 or 5 notes. And I use that as part of the clinic for the music educators, because you can do anything if your kids have a will and you have a way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. The song that my singer is so bummed about is Blue Christmas, the "I'll have a blue."
Oh, yeah.
So the basses who have fully changed are just loving being Elvis, and then the guys who haven't are just owning that they haven't and loving their high notes. And now that this one has changed, we've lost our center of our tone. And oh, I know. I'm like, you can sing it down the octave. It's okay. It's not the same. Poor guy. I love it though. But that's such a nugget right there. Wherever there's a will and a way, you can make it happen. I'm glad we looped back for that. That was a good loop back.
Good.
I have a question though. With all this love of singing and all this love of trumpet and marching band and being drum major, how did you choose? Did you end up majoring in choral or orchestra or band? And what did you end up teaching?
So I majored in voice with a minor in trumpet.
Okay.
And then that was bachelor's, and then master's was in choral conducting. Both of them were performance majors, but it was interesting because the reason that it was performance is I was heading education. My dad had been in industry, and there were a lot of challenges in industry. You know, you get bought and sold, and your companies do. Mm-hmm. And so all kinds of challenges with consistency, and I didn't want to have that as a performer where I had to go meal to meal to meal. So my bachelor's was actually headed to be an education bachelor's, but right in my senior year, about December, the chair of the department said, "Hey, you want to be the first art?" I forget what they called it. It was basically graduate assistant for fine arts, and I was like, "You mean like a free master's?" Uh-huh. So I said, "Sure, I'll do that." Well, then you have to complete your bachelor's this spring, and the only way to do that was to switch over to performance and do a full recital. Mm-hmm. And prepare that in 3.5 months, which
Whoa.
I did, survived, went on and became the grad assistant in arts management for fine arts, finished the master's in performance, choral conducting, got to conduct the Pittsburgh Symphony, by the way. That was really cool. And then went back and got my student teaching. So I have 2 performance degrees and certification to teach, and I went into teaching. So the consistency of paycheck was there. I got to work with kids, which really was the joy of my life. And then I got to work with adults in that administrative thing.
Wow. Okay, so you really did find a way to merge all of your musical passions from growing up, which is beautiful. It's cool to see your story. What was your first teaching job?
What? I'm sorry?
What was your first teaching job? Sorry to interrupt you.
So there was a little school called Lampeter Strasbourg, High Pioneers, and that school is in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and everyone thinks, oh, it's only Amish there. It's not quite true, but there are a lot of Amish and Mennonite and everybody else now. It's quite a diverse community now, but then it was fairly homogeneous. And so the school had 650 kids in the whole high school, 9 through 12, and when I got there were 70 students in the chorus, which is a pretty good percentage. When I left there were 165 kids in 11 ensembles.
Whoa!
At Lampeter Strasbourg.
How did you teach 11 ensembles?
Got to school before the sun rose and left school after the sun set every day.
Every day. What was your favorite one?
The madrigals. The mads they were just incredible. I mean, there were a bunch of Harmony Explosion. The guys' barbershop group was fantastic. Concert choir ended up doing a lot of major works, which is pretty tough you have to select them carefully for high school. But the biggest deal we ever did was the Mozart Requiem with orchestra, with full soloists. A couple of them went on to be professional singers. And but the madrigals were the close-in group. We rehearsed an intense 2 hours every week after school hours, so you had to be focused and you had to be attentive to it. And they went to Eastern MENC or ACDA, I forget, and PMEA a couple of times. So
Wow.
they were a fine group and super dedicated. Still in touch with some of them. In fact, one of them sings in my current adult men's chorus called Parkside Harmony.
Oh, wow. That's such a full circle. So if that was so fun, why did you choose to do admin? Why did you choose to leave and start doing admin stuff?
So that's an interesting thing because when your heart is music, it's hard to step away from that. But in working with kids all those years, I felt like there was an opportunity to affect more lives. And so the logical step there, at first I went to chairman of fine arts, and that affected more lives. But then to become an administrator, you actually could affect more lives. It's a strange catch-22, though, for all you music educators thinking about being an administrator. When you step out of the classroom, and I'm sure this probably seems logical, you step further away from the kids. So even though you have the potential of affecting more lives, as you step away from the classroom, your life is less affected by the kids. So it's sort of have to give up to get. And what I gave up was that day-to-day, like work and voice lessons and 6 kids at a time, or this quartet or that quintet, and all the fun of that, and the many performances that you just revel in. But what I was able to do was become a school principal and sort of change cultures and improve. I did a lot with equity in my years, and so improving the sense of inclusiveness and so forth in schools, very important.
What was your first admin job?
First admin job was, besides chairman of fine arts at Lampeter Strasbourg, was assistant principal at Hempfield High School, which a lot of people said, well, Hempfield it was a pretty huge school for suburban, but they said Hempfield's sort of like LS, Lampeter Strasbourg, on steroids. So it was the same kind of culture, but a lot bigger. So that was an interesting thing, and that was assistant principal.
And then when did you move, or what did you learn during being assistant principal that prepared you to be principal?
So a lot of structural things, a lot of the ways to deal with other adult leaders, and by leaders I mean teachers, and how to manage the relationship between administration and teachers. That's a pretty big deal and pretty important, and a lot of people just ignore it, unfortunately. And you teachers that are here listening are probably nodding your heads right now. A lot of administrators, just once they get in the seat, they act like they're all that in a bag of chips. An old expression, I know, but
no, I love that one, especially regular plain potato chips.
But you're no administrator unless you realize that you're serving the teachers and serving the parents and serving the kids and serving the community. If you think all those things are there to serve you, you shouldn't be in administration. You should be doing something else.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Can we look back and define something? I would love to hear your definition, because I feel like servant leadership is such a big role of good admins, and it's evident that you had that. How do you define culture? You talked about changing the culture at a school. How do you define culture, and what did you see as it changed?
So that's a super deep question, and I'm glad we have 3 hours for this interview. Define culture as it's a continuum. So people in a culture have been in that culture for a long time, but because energy affects things that are so culture can be static, and if it's static, it's going to tend to stay static. But as energy comes in, people move in from other areas, new ideas come in, that energy is applied to that static object and it tries to move it. So if the energy is consistent or is significant, you'll move culture, and culture will change. So I guess the definition of culture is the beliefs and mores of a group of people, generally in a regional area, but not always, because there's a culture amongst political parties and so forth, and they're all over. They're not necessarily a certain region. But as far as service, and I really wanted to get back to servant leadership, if you don't mind. You might have,
I love
that would have
it.
been the next question. But in serving a culture, sometimes that means saying things that folks don't necessarily want to hear, and doing things that they don't necessarily want to hear. For instance, and I don't want to mention the area or the region or anything, because there could be a listener from there. When district that I served was going through significant change culturally. Students of color, students who were traditionally underrepresented, were moving into the district and making it so rich and so full as a district. But there was resistance from the people who were traditionalists, I guess you could say, conservative in their views, or this is not our district that I remember when I was growing up. Sure, that is the energy of change that comes in and affects things. And so part of my mission, I felt, was to communicate and to collaborate and coordinate the change process. And I think we succeeded, or at least we got that started while I was working with that district. Then I moved on to another district that was well on the road. And so I fit right in there. And that actually was the district I ended up with in Lancaster.
So I'm really glad you brought this up, because you're talking so much about these things that I think are really important. And outside of the music world, people get classes in leadership and in those type of how do you change cultures. Those are things my husband in the business world gets to go to trainings on. So what were you doing when you were in this situation where you needed to facilitate a change in culture? What did you do to support and encourage your teachers and your community to shift with the energy in the right direction?
So part of it was to embrace the new elements in the culture, to provide opportunities for the folks who were joining that community to have their voice. So we had World Cultures Day. We had sort of now this word's passé now, but a diversity day and a diversity experience and diversity week. One thing I did in a district that is on the very same lines is we had multicultural year. Again, that's another word that you, okay, what's that mean now? But multicultural year helped this particular district recognize all of the cultures that were represented within its population and celebrate them with food and with music and with PA announcements and with assemblies. We even had a portion of First Americans, Native Americans, who we brought in a singer and did a whole assembly program and experiential thing with the kids. At any rate, that kind of thing is what one needs to do to help create awareness. In later times, we've had committees and district-wide initiatives that bring people to the table to talk about what does it mean to be inclusive or to address your own bias. And first you have to know that you have bias, and everybody has bias. And every piece of research, as you know, even if you try to make it as objective and clean as possible, is going to have bias. Every question has bias. Even a survey that looks like it's black and white has bias, because humans are biased. So we need to be able to address those things. And so a big part of that work in the last two districts was addressing, recognizing your own biases, and then dealing with them and finding ways to say, oh, I get that about me. Let me try to be more open to who you are and what you represent.
What I love about these examples is you're not just saying this is where the culture needs to go. Instead, you're opening the door for conversation. It's evident that it starts with service, and it was through experiences and through conversation and through education that it sounds like you were able to impact the culture. That's huge.
I hope I was, and I hope that folks continue to think that way, because culture change never stops. It always is evolving. There's nothing that's fixed except the things that are dead, and rocks.
That's awesome.
A whole piece of that servant leadership is that you exist as a leader to remove obstacles, to break down roadblocks. There's a great analogy that I use frequently when I'm teaching leadership classes, and that is that when you encounter a huge boulder in the road, you can't get around it, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, all that stuff. You break the boulder down into smaller portions. So it goes from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8. Eventually, what you've done is create gravel and you pave the road with that gravel. So the roadblock becomes the pathway. It's
Oh, that's a beautiful analogy.
neat.
Yeah, gosh, I'm borrowing that. I'm going to borrow
Sure.
that. That's lovely. I'll give you all the credit. Don't worry. Footnotes and everything.
Okay.
That's a
Cool.
gorgeous analogy. So what did you do when let's loop this back to teachers that are listening. Let's say a teacher in your school came to you and was either resistant to the new gravel or having a hard time. What did you do to help them see a better direction or to find the resources they needed to succeed?
Well, to be frank, often the teachers are the ones that say this is what the new gravel should look like, and the administrators are the ones that create the pathway or that put the circumstances, the variables in place so that that pathway, really the teachers are the ones that are in the service, the direct service to students. So I don't mean to sound like all I did was satisfy the needs of teachers all the time, because sometimes you can't do that for a lot of reasons. But advice came from and energy came from all directions, and your job as an administrator is like the same as a choral conductor or an orchestral conductor. Move the music where it needs to move so that you create this consistent output.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love that you've connected everything you're talking about leadership wise and administratively to us as musicians. I guess that's a perfect segue into what do we do to make this win-win situation for music educators and administrators? What are those tips you have for us?
Sure. And that's probably the biggest thing. And there are a lot of offshoots, and this is not going to be organized thinking here. But
that's okay.
First and foremost, kids, students, people, humans need the arts. We know that. But a lot of times administrators and school boards, when they're looking to cut things, they see them as elements on the outside of concentric circles, and then closer to the center is, health services, and closer is math and science, and those kinds of things. It's not really true. We all know as music teachers that the arts are core to everything, and that math can be interpreted through art, and that history is displayed through art, and emotions of people and conflict and resolution all come through art and music. When you think of dissonance and consonance, dissonance is the same thing as cultural stress, and consonance is when you resolve that. All of those things are in music and the arts, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the arts stay at the center of that. So part of the challenge is helping music teachers and art teachers recognize that as the essence of the core. They'll be able to say, oh yeah, my stuff's really important. Why and how is it important? And then helping other teachers, parents, school board, other administrators recognize that as well. The healthiest schools are those that have a really healthy arts program. And there's plenty of research on that. And schools tend to implode when they remove arts programs. So that kind of verbalization and backing it up with facts, really important. We started, when I was a music teacher, in every program, and then we did it at the district and regional level for our state. We would have the principal of the school, the host school, read hey, can you read this little thing that helps people recognize the PMEA District 10? Sure. And as the principal's reading it, hopefully he's read it ahead of time, but it says, musicians are amongst the highest scoring students on SAT. Musicians are amongst the highest placed kids with scholarships. Musicians are amongst the highest executives across the world and across the country and across the state, blah, blah, blah. So on, musicians often make the best athletes. So you keep going through this, they go through this litany, and it makes not only the administrator recognize that, but here's an administrator saying it to all the people in the audience, and the audience goes back and tells their administrators theoretically and so forth. So having the facts is really important for music teachers. Having the facts is really important for administrators. Sometimes they overlook that. Oh, it's just painting. It's not. It's eye-hand coordination. It's deepening what happens between the left and right sides of hemispheres of the brain, et cetera, and you can make a list and keep doing it. So I know I just rambled.
No,
But
this was good. You
I
were
think that's a
talking
good
about
piece.
communicating. Yes.
Yeah.
How do you communicate not just it's a concert with this great song, or for your example from the beginning of our conversation, it was the Four-Way Requiem with soloists, and how do you communicate that to the other teachers in your school, to their admins? I do think it's important to note everything you're saying is true for community ensembles as well. Getting your board on the same page, communicating with your community. It's all about that. How are you communicating value piece?
Sure. Sure. Another thing that is sort of, I don't know the word for this, but it's what we do as school music teachers is we have to be mindful of who is in which children are in our ensembles. Now, don't take this the wrong way. It should be open door. But if there's a school board kid hanging out right on the outskirts or is friends with kids that are in the chorus or the band, that kid probably can play the cymbals or can sing a pretty good bass one part. That student should be in chorus, and the earlier they're in the music program the better. So this is inside for our educators. Get school board kids in your ensemble and keep them happy. And that doesn't mean you cater to them or make them look like, like they're better than other kids, but just get them in. They're going to go home and tell their parent, oh, I love chorus today, it was so much fun. And that parent, when that parent sits as one of 9 on a school board and someone says, why don't we cut the chorus? That parent's going to say, not cutting the chorus.
Right.
And it's going to be straight up. The other thing is have administrators. When I was a choral director at Lampeter Strasbourg, the high school principal, H. Dale Spalding, and I don't think he'll mind, had several kids, and they all were in the band and chorus. And it was great. And actually, his son is the one that I mentioned before in Parkside Harmony, still in my chorus. So
yes.
It is good to have the children of administrators and school board members in your ensembles. That's a really important thing.
So step 1, communicate your value. Step 2, get some people in get them in the space, invite them in the space, make space for them. Don't cater to them, make space for them. That's important as well.
Yeah.
What else?
I think step 3 is engage. So the more you perform out in the public, I was at one district where I was serving as a sort of a consultant, and the district barely had any concerts. And so the administrative team, the school board didn't really recognize that there's any value in that program or much value in that program. So we have to be really mindful that engagement is being out there in the public space, in the public face. Lampeter Strasbourg would do 20 plus concerts in the holiday season, and we saw thousands of people. The auditorium was packed for the annual concert, annual winter concert, spring concert, Christmas concert, whatever. We were outreaching all the time, and so we know as music teachers that's a huge demand on our personal time, but we have to do it. And same thing with the arts teachers. You have to have an art show. Often run the art show in conjunction with the concerts. Why not? But being out there in the public eye makes it much more difficult for a program to be limited.
So making opportunities to engage with your school community and your actual community. We used to go on field trips. I live in Savannah, and they have all those beautiful squares. So I remember my second year teaching, I said, okay, we're going to take all of the piano students. I'm going to wheel my little piano. We're going to set up in a square and play. Well, you have to have a busking permit to do that. By the way, found that out. However, our school boards downtown, they put out all this electricity, and we set up on the steps of the school board. It was such a huge hit that it became not just a thing we did every year, but they opened it to the whole district, and any ensemble, band, choir, orchestra, piano, whomever, could come and play. They called them lunchtime serenades on the steps of the Board of Education.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
And those are the type of engagement things.
Yeah. So we have, in Lancaster, PA, we have an advocacy team called Music for Everyone that has given millions of dollars to local musicians and schools and so forth. But part of their mission is to get music out in the public eye. And we as music teachers have to do the same thing. And sometimes that engagement means making the public sing or having the public sing, allowing the public to play instruments. So what happens if you have Bring Your Instrument Day in the park? And the high
Yes.
school band with their uniforms and their banners shows up with 100 extra chairs and 100 extra pieces of music. And every band kid sits every other seat, and people bring their instruments and fill in and just play. Even if they don't play well anymore, they're playing. And they remember that because it chemically imprints on their brain. What happens if you have a community sing? What happens if you have a pop-up hallelujah chorus at the local farm market during Christmas week? What happens if? So you keep thinking outside of the box. You cannot be a school program that has 2 concerts a year.
Right. Oh, I love this. Sorry to interrupt, but I have to tell you the coolest story. After we recorded this episode, Dr. Butterfield and I talked about some of the ways to engage. And you know what we talked about specifically? We talked about travel. And that is why I am so excited that Kaleidoscope Adventures is one of the sponsors of the Music Ed Matters podcast. They are all about creating experiences and opportunities where this type of engagement, all of the things that Dr. Butterfield is talking about, happen. If you don't believe me, check out what Dr. Butterfield had to say about travel and all the things he had done with his organization and his choirs. Hey, Dr. Butterfield, let's talk about travel.
Oh my gosh. It's probably our favorite thing to do. My wife Ann and I travel a lot. We just got back from a teaching trip, a music trip, as a matter of fact, to Ireland. And then we went to England to teach, or I did, and accompanied me. And then we toured in Scotland. And when I was a choral director, it was really great because we were able to take kids to various places like Toronto and to Virginia Beach, and also to real music like conventions and so forth. And they had great experiences. When I took a group to Pittsburgh for Music Educators National Conference, we sang at the Cathedral of Learning and the Heinz Chapel. They're like, they still talk about Heinz Chapel. So getting kids in places and traveling, awesome. Traveling myself, also awesome.
I love it. I'm so glad. And it ties in perfectly to engage. You can engage and build advocates through travel.
Oh, sure. Sure. We had some really, some good folks, some good planners that helped us with our travel. And it made it like incredibly easy and fulfilling. When we tried to travel, like let's just do it on our own, we had a lot of downtime, a lot of wasted time. So it's really good to have someone that can advocate for you. Sometimes we had parents that could help us plan. I have had some friends that helped us plan. We had some professional groups that helped us too.
I love it. Thanks for sharing your travel stories.
Sure.
Okay. Communicate, get the people in the space, engage. These are all great tips. What else?
I think, you have to dream no small dreams, make no small plans. I get that from Mel Rozier, who was the superintendent at Lampeter Strasbourg, so I want to give credit where credit's due. But if you dream no small dreams, that means that you don't stay within, we can only do this. We could do great things, big things, like singing at the National Cathedral, which my Lampeter Strasbourg choir did. Like being on the steps of the Capitol, like dream no small dreams and make no small plans. So planning is the whole sense of, all right, how do I strategically and tactically arrange the future as a school music teacher to preserve my program and preserve our program and grow our program in best service to the kids and community. So dream no small dreams, make no small plans. That would be the next thing, I think.
Dream and plan. Make the steps. Find the next best step. Don't just show up haphazardly. What else?
I think another one is develop your advocacy, your group of advocates. And the advocates, of course, are parents, but they can quickly be sort of dismissed by a school board if they don't show up in force. But more than them, getting community people like the Rotary, like Kiwanis Club, like the Chamber of Commerce, like the mayor, like the captains of industry, getting them to be engaged in the program, be supporters of the program, even be sponsors of the program. And you can take that quite literally. You can sell program ads, but what you really want is, Johnson and Murphy to show up at the concert and say, we'd like to present this award to the so-and-so kid. This is our annual award, $1,000. So you're doing this thing where all the employees of Johnson and Murphy recognize, holy cow, they're supported.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else says, man, they're a major in our community. We better not touch the music program.
I love that. And it's so easy to identify. And it's a simple invitation. It's an ask. And I loved saving seats for like to see if the mayor would come or if some of the big businesses would come. That was always so fun to have a special seat for them in the audience too.
Absolutely. That's key. I hope everyone heard that. Saving seats for them, inviting them specifically to sit in a position in the auditorium. Then you can also kind of assemble them for a pre-concert little thing. Now that's the choir director can't do that. Neither can the band director. You're too busy. But the president of the boosters organization, make sure you have one of those, by the way. That person could have a little, meet and greet beforehand, and right before the concert, in they walk.
Yes, good
And
visibility.
hey, welcome everyone. Certainly would like to welcome the Johnson & Johnson executives down in the front. And our mayor, it's great to have you here. We're going to all sing along together. So we might put the microphone on you, Mrs. Mayor, and see what happens then. But everybody, you're welcome to our concert. Thanks for being here. Boom.
I love that. Good. Oh, I hope everyone heard that. That's a great segue into starting the concert. How fun.
You want to make them feel good. You want to make them feel engaged. So again, back to engagement, they should sing. We always had a sing-along every holiday concert. And then you invite alumni back because alumni can be your base for a pretty big fundraising and support campaign and, if necessary, to go to bat at the school board. So you invite them back and have them sing the traditional song, whatever that is, play the traditional piece.
I love the approach of creating your advocates. I always think of advocacy as telling the story, but you can also cultivate and create your advocates. What a great way to look at, instead of just sponsors, you're creating advocates.
That's right. And if you're the only one telling the story, then only the people in earshot of you are hearing it. But if many people are telling the story, you see how that multiplies.
I love that quote as well. What another great nugget of wisdom. All right, are there any other tips you want to leave us with?
I just think one of the hardest things is to take rejection. And sometimes you meet rejection because they're really saying to you, try another way. Be creative, be resourceful. When I pledged my fraternity in college, one of the biggest things was be resourceful. And they would give you little challenges, how to be resourceful and so forth. Well, that's really important when you go out into, that was Phi Mu Alpha, by the way, music.
I knew exactly what you were talking about. I was the sweetheart. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there you go. And so being resourceful means don't just take no. Say, okay, what do I need to do that better? Thank you. I appreciate you looking at that objectively. How could I present this in a different way? Or what would you suggest the next step to be? And don't be defensive or posturing, because you'll lose that. You could win a battle and lose a whole war because you forced an issue. I need that $10,000. Well, no, you don't. Really.
Restructure.
What you need is administrative support. Cool, I get it. I get the whole picture of the school and that we've got a lot of needs. What could I do to make this happen? Or could we talk about a timeline for making this sort of thing happen? So always be ready to shift and be as agile and flexible as possible so that you can get what you want in the long run without burning any bridges in the short run.
I think that's the perfect connection back to being a servant leader. We all lead our individual organizations and want them to succeed, but instead of looking at a no as a wall, thinking no as a way to grow. That's like a little rhyming thing. Yeah. Such a great way to go in and having these ideas and ways to talk to your administrators. All right, so make sure I get all of these. So communicate, get the people in the space, engage, build your advocates, and take rejection with grace by being willing to be flexible and listen to feedback. Did I get it all?
That was 5 things, right, I think?
Yeah, I think that was 5.
This way, and that's service.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
What can I do for you? How can I serve the community? How can I best serve the kids? All these things, these 5 things you just mentioned. is the service. So take that to your heart and go from there.
That's the perfect. I always give the guest a thing at the end to say the one thing that really matters, and I think you just summed it up perfectly. Service. Good. Oh, this has been so great. Dr. Butterfield, thank you so much for doing this and taking time and sharing so many great experiences and tips. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
And I have as well. And thank you for the honor to be able to speak to your friends and listeners and viewers. It's been a pleasure.
Seriously, y'all, I had so much fun talking to Dr. Butterfield. I hope that you had an enjoyable time listening to this. I can't thank you enough for supporting and listening to the show. What was your takeaway? Are you going to work on communication? Are you going to open doors and find more people to get in your space? Are you looking for ways to engage in your community in new and innovative ways? What are you doing to build your advocates? And how are you taking that and helping yourself find questions to ask and accepting the rejection as a way not of no, but to grow? I can't wait to hear what you do with this A&C episode. I'm really thankful that you're listening. In case you're wondering, you matter. We all know that music matters, and we now know how to translate that for our administrators. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.